Hello there, and welcome to my first video on binomial distributions and how to properly use the TI83 and 84 calculators to your advantage. Now, the TI83s and 84s are limited in their functionings for binomials, but they're still fairly usable. And fortunately enough, if you have the prerequisite videos and concepts down, you should be able to use the calculator functions with very little to no difficulty. The first prerequisite is you have to know how to create a binomial probability distribution from scratch, and you have to know some of the logic behind binomial probability. Now again, if you have watched the prerequisite videos in my binomial playlist, you should have no issues with these concepts at all. Now, a binomial probability distribution can get very cumbersome when you start working with larger sample sizes. For instance, if I want the probability that our variable is between 0 and 50, well, let's see here. And what do I have for a sample size? I have a sample size of 150 and a probability of success 0.23. So right now, this is bad. I mean, really bad. Because I'd have to find when x equals 0, x equals 1, and if I was to create the full distribution down to when x equals 150. That's nuts, especially in one night. And by the way, if I was to do this math accordingly for when x is between 0 and 50, let's see here, I'd get, let me pull out my handy dandy calculator, about 0.9986. Let me write it out here, 0.9986. So nothing too complicated, but that's a pretty high number. How would we get to it normally? Let's see here. We would, by hand, if we had created the distribution, find the probability when x equals 0, and we'd have to find when the probability of x equals 1, and we're adding these two values together, so we've got nothing but decimals, plus when x equals 2, and have to keep doing this all the way down until we hit when x equals 50, using our formula for binomials. And by the way, yes, both these methods should come out to be the same. Formula, computation, ways that could happen, likelihood of success, likelihood of failures. So again, all of this is continuous and it keeps wrapping up into each other. Now, the calculator can do this in one fairly short step, but you have to understand how to do it both ways, because there will be situations where if I flip the inequality signs, or if I give you, let's say, probability when x is greater than or equal to 10, the calculator cannot do this directly. We have to do a little bit of a manipulation to get it to work. Still with me? Good. So some of the drawbacks of calculator functions, the first one is that the TI83s and the 84s do not have the same interface. TI83s are a little more rustic and they require the inputs to be done manually. TI84s sometimes, emphasis on the word sometimes, have prompts available for you to fill out everything via their system. So even though they both use the same function, they both require the same inputs, 83s tend to give you nothing, and TI84s tend to give you prompts that are handy, but they can get a little annoying if you want to do some extra stuff in between. Secondly, one of the other drawbacks of the calculators is lack of repetition. If your teachers want you to use the binomial formula to create a binomial probability distribution, sometimes it's quicker to do things via the calculator instead of doing it through, oh, I don't know, a binomial PDF function. You don't know what it is yet because I haven't talked about it. And finally, the last drawback of a calculator is it will not help you create a binomial probability distribution as effectively as you want it to. And that's just because when you start working with binomial probability distributions and you need to find each individual probability, you're going to be doing 50 calculator functions. Now, granted, you're doing 50 equations, but it's still a mess. And it's easier just to do it using the computation formula and hitting a repeat function, but that's beside the point. We'll talk about that later on. So unfortunately, folks, that's all for this part. Now, mind you, this is not a free series, and that's because some of the later on stuff is going to be very class specific, and we want to make sure that I can get some support for these videos. So the more support that we get, the more free videos I can make. And this isn't going to be an expensive video either. This is going to be the equivalent of somebody asking a question per video. Now remember those lefties, righties, tweeners, and split videos that I have available? They're going to be of that length and that detail, but not of the same concept. Now the idea of a lefty, righty, tweener, and split will help you, but it's going to, let's just put it this way, it's not going to be as calculator friendly. So in the meantime, this is the Tall Guy signing off.